Hey guys, and welcome to the recap of Wildcard Weekend, which concluded yesterday evening. Obviously, I'm going to go in the games of their order and, go over what I thought were the key elements of the games and that sort of thing. Starting off with Chargers Texans. As we all know, the Texans were underdogs, and I quite thought that with their porous O line, with the fact that they had limited weapons, that this Chargers defense would be able to, essentially swing the momentum in the Chargers side. Now, as we all know, Herbert had a bad game. People are saying he's bad. Oh, people are saying this, saying that. Ladd McConkey had a great game, obviously. But this just goes to show you that playoff football is unpredictable, very unpredictable. That's what I thought about this weekend, to be honest, in certain aspects. So with Herbert's picks, I do think that a couple were not his fault. Some tipped balls and some catchable footballs and that sort of thing. Obviously, the one where he overthrew McConkey, not good. He just overthrew it and it got too much air under the ball, which I've seen, from many, many different quarterbacks. And, it happens, And the thing is that Herbert, maybe he's not a 3 interception quarterback. Like, to me, it's like the only player that was ever a minimalist in terms of interceptions in the regular season was Aaron Rodgers. Because as we all know, he finished with, I think it was like 502 touchdowns, assuming he retires, I guess. And then like 118 picks or something like that, But it's like that was the best by far in the whole history of the NFL, But it's hard to do. It's hard to do and not. And then it's like in the playoffs, you can get antsy, you can have strange things happen. But overall, I guess, let me go over like the bulk of the game. I think that the Texans really came alive and they were like, oh, let's not make our QB win this alone. Essentially, when Stroud was in the end zone, ran to the side and made that throw 35 yards downfield, or I think around there it was, that ultimately changed. And it's not like the Texans weren't able to like move the ball back and forth and it was a completely stagnant offense before then. But Stroud was getting pressured by Khalil Mack and Bosa. And then they were essentially inert afterwards, unable to get to Stroud. And it's strange, You don't expect a O-line to click like that and then to protect Stroud as well as they did. And then of course you have Nico Collins who balled, much like I thought he would, being the best weapon for the Texans. And you just look at the Chargers and it's kind of what they had went through this season where they weren't able to run the ball on this Texan front. And, the Texans defense, I did know that they're very well coached and they are very good defensive unit. I just thought that it would swing in the Chargers' favor, obviously, because the Chargers have a better O-line and they would be able to protect Herbert and they would be able to score more points. But that obviously wasn't the case. I think the true test for the Texans will be next week against the Chiefs. But until then, I mean, I still wouldn't say I trust their O-line. I mean, it's one game. Don't get me wrong, it's against two veteran, very skilled pass rushers. But props to the Texans. They really played, better than anybody thought. But moving on to Ravens Steelers, as we all know, there was speculation of this game. Was it going to be a bad game? Just in terms of like competitiveness. And yes, it was bad in terms of competitiveness. The Steelers ultimately just didn't do anything offensively. To me, it should be Russell Wilson's last game there, even though he says he plans to resign with them. I don't know how they can be so stupid as to say that we're going to resign this guy especially with, who knows what's going to happen with Tomlin. I have a lot of respect for him as a person, as a fan of another fan base. It is hard to keep that level of winning, you know, with when you've had a QB carousel and essentially all you've had to rely on for years was your, elite defense, but looking at this, I think it is, kind of the wake up call that they need, because like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they just ran the piss out of the Steelers, and it just goes to show how important that tandem is. And there's not much else to be said. And this was without Zay Flowers, you know. So really just kind of a poor performance by the Steelers. They had some players that were really trying to make it work, like Freiermuth. But like even after the game, the way that Pickens was in his interview or whatever, saying he had no hope or whatever it was, like, goodness gracious, get some composure. That's all I really have to say about that game, I guess. Just an ultimate, bad showing by the Steelers, which is how their final 4 weeks in the season had ended as well. Oops, sorry. Moving on, we have Bills, Broncos. As we all know, the Broncos went out and they scored an early touchdown and they were shut out after that. The Bills, really, to me, they just played the game. They played the game, the way they wanted to. And it's like Josh Allen is, to me, just he's such a freak at the QB position. In terms of that, he's got Lamar Jackson's like a super freak, but then you got Josh Allen, who is also a freak, not as fast, obviously, but does everything, and it does it very, very well. But, shout out to the Bills defense. I think that Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, and those guys that are going to be there next year, and then hopefully they bring in more talent, which I know they will because they have cap space now. And they know that, if they have a couple more weapons, Bo Nix will have a lot easier time distributing the ball. But the thing that I'll say that was my crazy play of the game was that catch by Ty Johnson in the back of the end zone. Probably the best play all weekend, to be honest with you, and just props to the Bills. They, it's like how I said that they have Cook, then they have Ray Davis, and then they have Johnson, and it's probably one of the best trios of running backs in the league. And even Josh Allen believes it. I don't think a guy like him is just gonna say like, oh yeah, Ty Johnson's the best third down running back in the league. Might still be a little far-fetched, but he is the third guy. And I guess I wouldn't be able to say who, would be better than him. But overall, a crazy game. And we're going to see fireworks next week when they take on Baltimore. Moving on to my Eagles, Packers. Obviously, a very disappointing game for my Packers. The thing, and regardless of what side you're on, of whether or not you think, oh, the no calls and all of that, I do think as a Packer fan, you can't tell me that if they put on different color uniforms and it was, or you didn't know which team was which, that you wouldn't be like, oh yeah, this play is or this game is called fairly. And it just, to me, it's crazy mind-boggling. And there was even something that was pointed out in a different game about how there was a face mask call. I'm trying to remember which game it was, because, they all seem to blend into one when you watch every single game almost, or, which commentators were which. But they were saying, they're like, but that flag wasn't thrown live during the play, so they can't go back and do it. There's just so many question marks to me with officiating that there needs to be, like, if there is a no call, there needs to be some sort of accountability, and the way that Keyshawn Nixon took the helmet to the helmet, and then apparently there's a fumble, and then we see a view where the ball is clearly not moving and he's on the ground. I get the whole bottom of the pile fighting for it type of thing, but it's like that's boony backyard football. That it's like, oh, they don't have cameras, they don't have anything, and it's not the NFL. This league that's supposed to be the highest caliber of competition, but they unjustly rob. But regardless of that, I will say this: Jordan Love didn't look like himself. The pick to Bond, you can look at it, that, hey, he threw it right to the guy. But it was one of those bizarre plays where it's like, who knows if the pressure just got to him for whatever reason. You'd have to ask him. But Tucker Kraft did end up on the ground, so maybe it just was off with Love's timing of the pass or something like that. You never know how much a play is rehearsed and how much it's embedded into a player and how they execute the play. Because clearly on that play, if Kraft had got it, they would have had a positive gain. Instead, it's a pass downfield right to the defender in the path that Kraft would have been running, judging from where he was going. But overall, to me, the Kraft or the Darius Slay interception to me was also kind of like, yeah, he got a one-on-one matchup, but that matchup happens to be against Darius Slay. And that Slay is always gunning for the Packers. He was obviously a Lion for a long time. And you just know that he covets the chance to get an interception, type of thing. And obviously, to me, Love kind of threw a lot of balls that were kind of underthrown this game, which is kind of uncharacteristic. With his big arm, he usually overthrows, and then it ends up hitting the ground. But obviously, the underthrown to Dontavian Wicks, where it's like Wicks definitely could have caught it or tried to go for it a little bit more, but it was overall a bizarre kind of where like, oh, Wicks is kind of the last guy to me that should be going for a deep ball as, a good route runner, doesn't have blazing speed, good speed, but doesn't have blazing speed. And it's like, you think about guys like Bo Mellon, Malik Heath, Jaden Reed, and Romeo Doubs, who obviously they hadn't exited the game yet. All of those guys were better deep ball catchers to me. And not to say that Wicks can't do it. He's caught in deep balls. But when they're contested like that, I just don't think that he has the game time reps to go up against a guy like Slay. And I get it. Love feels like he has to make a play. But overall, to me, people that are just looking at the number of picks as kind of like, oh, well, this is why he sucks. This is why he's not good or not worth the contract. At least he was competitive enough to throw it downfield, and it's like, it's not like he threw, the one to Bond was right to the defender, obviously, but the rest of them, obviously the one where it's like, oh, it was, less than a 1% chance to win the game, at the end on the left-hand side. That too, to me, it's like, that's kind of a coincidental sort of pick. That isn't really as much on the QB as, as like a bad interception where you're just throwing it into a lot of coverage or something. None of them were like that. But, I'm done, I guess, defending, Love. It's a tough pill to swallow at the end of the season, but it is what it is in the sense that, only Josh Jacobs could get this offense moving. And there were several other contributors at other parts of the game, but overall it was inconsistent. That's why they only scored 10. So, the thing that I'll say about the Eagles is that, Saquon was running hard, he was doing well, and he was definitely carrying that offense. But you look at, the 22 points that they scored, the touchdown at the beginning, really just kind of a really bad momentum swing. And that was Hurts' only touchdown pass after getting an incredible field position. off of what shouldn't have been a turnover, and I don't think if you actually look at the play, and you take your biases aside, you can't tell me that, oh, well, the Packers used to get all the calls, which just is, one of those outlandish bias statements to me that really takes from the integrity of the game. And, and if you fully believe that we got every single call, in the past, I mean, I can name several games where we didn't, but I'm not going to get into that. But the Eagles, to me, Hurts looked not good. Early in the game, he had a couple of first downs via passing and that sort of thing, but then ultimately, he didn't do anything. And this was after, I heard countless people saying that it was going to be a blowout of a game. And, to me, it's like, yeah, a 12-point loss doesn't mean that it was like close, but it's not like, the Bills Broncos score. It wasn't like, the Rams Vikings score last night. I mean, there were so many other games to me that it's like, this game was a blowout. But not this game. This game overall just like showed a lack of offense and a lack of confidence. And, everyone that was saying that, oh, Saquon's going to run all over, it's like, I do get that, like, he could have had a long run and a touchdown at the end of the game. But I think at that point, the Packers just really had mentally clocked out, because of how this game had went. And, the defense played phenomenal. I am very grateful for Hafley, and it's only going to look up from here as far as I'm concerned for him, because he's obviously proven that he could be a top defensive head coach in the league if he's able to, keep this kind of pace, going into next year. But and this was without Jaire Alexander, and that's what everyone brought up, is that they're like, well, they don't have Jaire, so there is no shot. And it's like, if you're looking to the first week of the season to justify why you thought this way, then you're reaching. The first week of the season compared to the first playoff game, teams, find their identity in the year. That's all that I'll say about that. But overall, to me, the Eagles did not look like a very clean. They did not look like a very clean team this game. It's like you have this good defense, but Jacobs had, I think it was 12 broken tackles or something. I get that he's an exceptional back, but you were supposed to be one of the best defenses, low scoring. And don't get me wrong, we didn't score high or anything like that, but there was so many momentum swings and stuff like that, in your favor, that you only win by 12. And Hurts doesn't pass for what's even considered average in the league. So that's all I have to say about that game. We'll see you next week, Eagles, and see whether or not you can really actually pull it together against your rival Commanders. Or sorry, the Rams. I'm sorry. Moving on, we have Commanders-Buccaneers, the closest game of the weekend, which isn't too shocking. The 4th and 5th seed. Obviously, the Commanders had won a couple more games in the regular season than the Buccaneers, with 12 wins to the Buccaneers 10. The Buccaneers obviously had some games that just did not go their way in the regular season, and their defense played porously, most notably against their division rival Falcons, who seemed to have their number for whatever reason, despite being an mostly off team this year. But this game, I kind of expected it. I did think that Baker would have more time, I guess, in this game, but they applied a good amount of pressure on Washington, and that is what their defense was missing. Not to say that they didn't, get pressure on other QBs during the season, but they really went and they did well against a good O-line in the Buccaneers. And it's like, Lattimore and Evans, that's always entertaining. Don't think it was really the headline of this game, though, to be honest with you. But Jaden Daniels really clutched up for his team, late in the game with a composure that you just don't see from someone that's a first-year guy, and he delivered. And it's, he's exciting to watch. And while I was pulling for the Buccaneers, I do not mind that the Commanders won. A team that just a year ago was a bottom dweller team, and they pulled it out. And, kudos to them. Wasn't the prettiest of finishes with a doink field goal to win it, but they did it. And, kudos to them. I don't think there's much else to say other than, each team's defense really played well in this game, in my opinion. No team should be unhappy that the other team scored, 20 or 23 about their performance. But yeah, my goodness, I will say this, the Buccaneers, the younger players, they definitely looked a little bit at times like the heat of the moment got to them, which is understandable with playoffs. You get a lot of nerves, as I can only imagine, for this. But we'll move on to Monday night. Rams, Vikings. Now, where to start with this? Obviously, the Vikings are not a run team, but even against the Lions last week, they were able to have, Aaron Jones was having successful runs, but then he's not able to run on the Rams. And, I did think that they would, cleanse the demons, but Sam Darnold just reverted to really bad QB habits, in my opinion. It seemed to me like he wasn't checking out more than one option on certain plays. Like when there was the pick and Addison was the intended target, he stared him down the whole time. And for whatever reason, Troy Aikman was saying that he's like, oh no, he looked to Hockenson. And I'm like, he had his head, literally, it was like it was stuck looking that way. So it's like, no, I don't think he even looked to Hockenson. And then the play where he didn't throw it to Jefferson, Jefferson was wide open and two guys had went downfield to block for him. Give it to Jettas and let him at least get some yards. But it was abysmal. And I mean, don't get me wrong, Darnold was under pressure, but there was definitely some of those. It looked, I made a reference to Caleb Williams, as Caleb Williams literally would stand in the pocket, act like he had nothing to worry about. Like you had some impenetrable offensive line, which does not exist in the NFL. But goodness. And then you got guys like Stafford looking like he's in poise, deep playoff form, like not even just first round playoff form. He's in deep playoff form and just throwing dimes everywhere. Didn't matter who. I feel sorry for Tyler Higbee. He comes back and he's balling, and then he gets a contusion, which I hope he plays next week. He's always been a very humble and hardworking tight end that makes, good plays. And then it's like Puka, Cooper Kupp, Kyron Williams. The shoe thing was the funniest thing I saw all weekend, of course, with Stafford going down, to try and help him, but he wasn't. And I was wondering, why is he hobbling like that? I thought he was hurt, and I was worried at first. And I'm like, oh, goodness. But the Rams, and so many people were not talking about them. But it's like, there's going to be people talking about them next week. And that game, you cannot tell me that if their offense is clicking like that, even against the Eagles, what are the Eagles going to do? What are they going to do? Because they don't have the offense to keep up with that. And if the Rams play, don't get me wrong, Aaron Jones and Saquon aren't the same player, but it's not like Aaron Jones is some no-name back either, and that sort of thing. And I really think this Rams team, many people talked about the distraction of the fires and all that. I really think that this battle hardened them. Like, they're like, we are going to go out and we're going to win this for them. And, if a team like the Packers that played as bad as they did, I guess apparently, and gave, the opportunities, so many opportunities to the Eagles, think about a guy like Stafford who just doesn't, he throws the occasional pick, So, I think the Eagles definitely have to be on notice and have to feel thankful that they have, I guess, an extra day of rest. But overall, kind of a crazy game. And I did not expect it to be this bad. But the thing that I guess I'll say about the game as well is this might just show the Vikings that they need a little bit more of an identity, because too many times their guys were clearly like locked up and that sort of thing. And that their passing identity, if it sinks, this team is about as bad offensively as like the worst team in the league. It just can't continue to go on. And I think O'Connell is smart, but I think that he does have his flaws as a young coach. And there's so many people that are saying, I guess the paradox of like people saying, well, it's because the Packers don't have a true number one wide receiver. Well, then tell me, what was the deal with the Vikings? They have Jefferson, who's a bona fide top 5, if not, maybe I don't know if I would say he's top 1 because he disappears in these big games. But you look at Jamar Chase, and it's like he would find ways to just dice up defenses, and get open for Burrow. And for people that's saying that Burrow would just, feed him the ball, it's like that may be true, but he would also just get open and, be a person that would be targeted. But you look at the Packers and people are like, oh, they need a true number one. It doesn't always come down to, a simple, who's at the position. So, you look at the Vikings, and then you also have Addison and Hawkinson, and even Aaron Jones, who does incredible things, down the field when he goes out on routes on occasion. And it's, people want to tell me, that, hey, they need this guy, they need to go after T. Higgins. I guess I wouldn't mind if we went after T. Higgins, but I don't think that he's going to be the be all end all for like the Packers or any team, that he goes to, and it's one of those things that you think a player's going to work out because they're high talent. They don't always work out. I'll just say that. But that's going to conclude, this kind of recap of the weekend and what I thought of the games and all of that. But if you like content like this, or you want to listen to more NFL content, I will be doing off-season content, whether it be speculating who signs where, who goes where, maybe reactions I will be reactions to contracts and who gets signed where, what team needs are before the draft and that sort of thing. I will be doing that all this off season, and I'll still be trying to maintain my twice a week uploads, but I will be releasing another video along this one of my predictions for the divisional round of the NFL. But this is Cast, and I am your host, Casty Streeter. And as always, go Pack Go.